Hello, this is Jason Clement, Technical Sales Manager at Isonas, and welcome to this online training video. This video is Pure Access Planning and Success. In this module, we will review understanding the needs of the customer, understand the value of a site survey and details to look for while on site, understand the details to look for with new systems and taking over existing systems, and understand power calculations. So first off, what is the goal of the system? Are we doing standard door access? Are we doing cabinet monitoring? Are we monitoring additional points? We need to figure out all this early on. Is this a new system or is it an existing retrofit? For existing systems, get a card or two and a reader model for testing. As a general rule of thumb for existing systems, get as much information as you can. Get pictures, get part numbers, get any old information from the integrator who installed it. Anything will be useful. Arrange a meeting with all departments involved, IT, human resources, maintenance, security, etc. In smaller systems, you're probably just dealing with one person, but when you get into K through 12, higher education, and other type of enterprise businesses, now you're going to have a lot of these different departments that will all be touching the system, and they all need to be on the same page. Do you need to interface to other systems? Are you using Active Directory? Are you using Milestone? Do you need to connect to the fire alarm system? These are all questions that need to be figured out beforehand. Set the proper expectation. Really, whenever you're selling any system, you really need to set the proper expectation so the end user, yourself, and everybody is on the same page. Site surveys are invaluable. Take time to examine the site, determine what is needed, and set the project up for success. Talk to all the departments who will touch the system. Obviously, IT will be touching it, sometimes human resources, sometimes maintenance, etc. Again, all these people need to be on the same page and all have the same goal and vision moving forward. As for prints, even an evacuation plan is better than nothing. Examine the site carefully. When in doubt, just take a picture. Not sure what locking hardware should go on that door? Take a picture. Not sure how to get a cable down to that door? Take a picture of it. Check all the doors, check the network closets, and look at the general install conditions. You don't want to show up to a giant warehouse finding that everything needs to be put in conduit and you didn't take that into account. So what do we look at the door? Make sure the doors open and close correctly. This goes for new systems and existing systems too. If the door's beat up, it's been bent, it's been hit by high-lows, whatever the case might be, it's hanging on by one hinge, simply putting an electric lock on there isn't going to fix it. The door needs to be fixed so that it's opening and closing and latching correctly before you can put your electric locking hardware on there. Determine the correct locking hardware or bring a locksmith with you. If you're not familiar with locking hardware or you haven't done it before, it is a bit of an art form and it does take a steady hand to get that installed. Especially when you install magnetic locks. If the magnetic lock is installed just a tiny bit crooked, it could potentially not lock when the door closes. If there's any existing hardware, get the part numbers off them, Google them, figure out what their voltage and power draw is. Do you need any peripheral devices connected to the system? For example, door contacts, request to exit devices, sounders, remote unlock buttons, etc. If you're using an intercom, make sure that it has a door release relay built in. Some of the cheap little Wi-Fi intercom systems, all they do is basically call a mobile device. They don't have a door release relay or anything else on there. Whereas if you get a true intercom system like an A-phone or 2N system, those will have a door release relay on there for you. On the network, are you going to utilize the existing network or maintain a totally separate physical network? Most of the time you're just going to utilize the existing network. For your existing networks, make sure you have enough switch ports available. Trust but verify. Go out and take a look at the switches and see if there's open ports on there. If you are utilizing PoE, ensure the switch can handle the full load of PoE devices. We're not the only PoE device out there. There's IP cameras, there's IP phones, there's all kinds of other devices that will draw power from the switch. We need to make sure that the switch can handle the additional load. If you need to add more switches or use midspans. Midspans will basically take the power load off of the network switch. When using an existing network, it's best to create a separate VLAN and lock it down. Standard security best practices. For Pure Access Manager, you'll need a server to run the software on. If you're using cloud, obviously you don't need anything on site. In this case, virtualization is your friend. And in some cases, you run into somebody's network that looks like this, in which case you may just want to leave this one to your competitors. Each device will need an IP address. DHCP is preferred, but you can still use static addressing. Our devices connect outbound on port 55533. First thing you do when you show up to the site in the morning, talk to the network administrator. Tell them this device is going to connect outbound on port 55533. This way they can add any exceptions in the firewall now instead of trying to do it at 5 or 6 o'clock when they may not be available and none of your devices will connect. By default, our devices will attempt to acquire a DHCP on the network, so if you're supposed to have static addresses, don't plug in all these devices and their default settings into somebody else's network because you might steal DHCP addresses from other devices that need those DHCP addresses. Discuss with IT how the readers will communicate, especially if you have many sites or remote sites with bad connections. Better to just get this stuff out of the way early rather than have it sneak up on you at the end of the project causing issues. Fire alarm. If they have an existing fire alarm, get the contact info for the contractor they use. If you are not certified in fire alarm, if you don't know what you're doing with fire alarm, don't open the panel, don't touch anything, just leave the panel alone. The only thing you should be touching is when the fire alarm installer comes out, he puts a relay in for you and says connect your wires right here. Determine how to interface the fire alarm to your magnetic lock and fail-safe doors. When in doubt, contact your authority having jurisdiction or your AHJ. They have the final say on how that should connect. We have different methods for this. The easiest method for us is to have the fire alarm contractor install a relay at every single door. Run your lock power through the relay. Whenever the fire alarm goes off, it automatically drops power to the device. However, sometimes that's not the easiest way for the fire alarm contractor to install it. You can also have the fire alarm contractor install a relay in each closet doors are run back to. You can either use a UL-rated power supply with the fire alarm input and run an additional power cable to each door. This is usually the best method if you have a lot of magnetic locks or fail-safe locks you need to unlock. Or you can use an Eltronics Entrada device. All of these are covered in our knowledge-based article over fire alarm and life safety. In the system, who will be administrating the system? In smaller systems, it's probably just going to be one person, pretty simple, but in larger systems, it may be divided. You may have HR, you may have security, you may have a couple other departments all doing different things in the system. For larger systems, it's easiest to configure the software and do the training before the install of the hardware. This way all your technician has to do, go out, plug in the reader controller, wire it up, it connects back to the software, run an update, all the cards and everything that are programmed in there will start working. Plus, if something is not working correctly, if the end user has been trained before that, sometimes they can go in there and fix the issue themselves without you having to stop working to go help them. Are you going to enter the information in manually, import the information, or bring it in via an Active Directory integration? So you can export from another system and import via CSV file, and again, you can use Active Directory to pull in those users. There's an Active Directory course that's an advanced course that is separate from this basic learning plan. Existing systems. Failure to plan is planning to fail. If you don't do your homework in taking over an existing system, you can step into a big hole that you may not be able to climb out of. Again, a general rule of thumb, get as much information as you can. What is the existing technology? Our reader controllers can read a lot of card formats, but we cannot read Andala, AWID, and some other proprietary technologies. These readers may just have a weakened output, and we can take over the system with an IP bridge. But as soon as you add an RCO4 or RCO3 in there, those devices won't be able to read the Andala, AWID, or proprietary cards. So now people will have to carry around 2 cards, remember which card to use at which door, etc. In this case, you can just replace all the existing readers with our R1 reader, and then replace all their credentials as well, so that they have one standard credential and all the readers look the same out at the door, whether it's an existing reader that's been replaced with an R1 or it's a reader controller. The IP bridge is the most cost-effective retrofit method. You can utilize the existing cabling, locks, and other devices out in the field. If you're doing an export from an existing software, so they have a 10-15-year-old access control system, well, they have 10 or 15 years worth of old stuff in there as well. You don't just want to export all the old stuff and import it into the new system. Have them clean that export up before you import it into the new system. And always get some cards to test and at least the card reader part number if you haven't seen it before. What's the existing technology? And more importantly, is everything working correctly on the existing system? Why are we taking this over? Is it because the software is unfriendly on the existing system? Well, that's easily solved. But if the customer says, well, I've got all these doors and some of them have never worked right since the system's been installed, well, it could be a configuration or software issue, but it could also be a hardware or wiring issue. So you have to take those into account when you quote out taking over the system. Utilizing existing power supplies, 99.9% of the time, yes. Communication. Not all panels are strictly Ethernet based. Some of them have an Ethernet connection to a main panel and then a big RS-45 loop going out to sub-panels, 1 or 2 door little panels that are scattered throughout the system. Well, we can take those over with IP bridges, but we can't utilize the RS-45 loop, so we have to put in Ethernet connections to all of those places where we're going to have IP bridges. So your customer says, well, I got about 20 doors on the system and here's my panel. You open it up and there's basically 1 or 2 boards in there with about 10 wires. Well, that's not enough to cover 20 doors worth. More than likely, they have sub-panels out in the field somewhere running back via RS-45. So watch out for that communication. If you don't take that into account, now all of a sudden you've got to get Ethernet infrastructure out to all of those IP bridges. Are there any peripheral devices connected to the panel that you need to take into account? Check your input contacts and their normal status. If you're replacing with reader controllers, check the lock voltage. If you've got 24 volt DC or 24 volt AC or high power 12 volt DC locks, you may still need to use the existing power supplies. And always get a card and a reader to test if you're not sure. Watch out for any existing software integration. If you don't take that into account, it may not work on a new system and your customer will be irritated. If you're exporting from the existing software and importing into Isonas, remember to clean it up before you import the data into Isonas. And when you're taking over an existing system, it's critical that you have Pure Access loaded and pre-programmed before the cutover. You don't want to send your tech out there with a box of parts and a blank software tenant that they then have to go out there and program everything and install everything and do everything while on site. Have as much done in-house as you can before going out there. Once you've taken an export or you've pulled in your information into Pure Access during this transition period, either they can't make any changes or all the changes in the existing software need to be logged or done simultaneously in Pure Access. This way there's no difference in programming, because if you go in and deactivate a card in the old system, but it's already programmed as active in the new system, well, you're going to have to deactivate that in the new system as well. While you're out on site, do one door first, the least used door, and ensure everything works before moving on. Find a nice quiet door to work on, work out any issues that you may run into, and then roll it out to the rest of the doors. Watch out for your power calculations. You don't want to push a switch up to its maximum power limit, because once in a while it'll go over it just by a little bit and it'll do weird things on your network. So watch your switches, check your PoE budget. Remember, you'll need a UPS for backup power if you're using PoE. A lot of time your edge switches aren't on a UPS. Remember, the reader controllers using PoE will draw a maximum of 12 watts, providing 600 milliamps 12 volt DC out at the door. Your IP bridge can use standard PoE, but we don't recommend using PoE to power that. If you're going to use Ethernet power for whatever reason, use PoE Plus to get 1.6 amps of power at that IP bridge. People will always ask, how do I create my rules in the system? How do I plan this stuff out? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Just take a spreadsheet program or a piece of paper and make 3 columns. At the top, write who, where, and when. Then just write down who has access to what and when. Then look for overlap or exceptions to the rules and build your weekly rules out from this document. For example, my IT department needs access at network closets, entry doors, and electrical closets, 24/7, even on holidays. My HR department needs access to entry doors and file room, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but not on holidays. And our executives need access to all doors 24/7, even on holidays. In this module, we reviewed understanding the needs of the customer. We don't want to sell the customer system A when they really wanted system B. And a lot of times you'll find the customer doesn't know what they want. They just want access control, but they don't really understand all the benefits that it can provide them. Understand the value of a site survey and the details to look for while on site. Any integrator can pick up a phone and say, you want 10 doors? Okay, $2,200 per door, and somebody will be out there in 2 weeks. The good integrators will go out, do a site survey, figure out exactly what the customer needs, and tailor the quote to them. Understand the details to look for with new systems and taking over existing systems. With new systems, you have a blank slate. Taking over existing systems, you got to deal with a lot of existing technology, so make sure you do your homework. And watch your power calculations, especially when you're using PoE. You don't want to push that PoE switch over its budget every once in a while because it will start doing weird things. In general, if you're troubleshooting something and it's an intermittent issue and it's acting really weird and you can't pinpoint anything, it usually boils down to some type of power issue. Thank you for watching this training video and have a fantastic day.